Good morning and welcome to Chapter 16. In Chapter 16, we're going to look at a couple of areas. We're going to start by looking at advertising, then we'll take a look at public relations, and we'll finish off by looking at sales promotion. So, why advertise? Well, that's the big question that companies face. And the reason, quite simply, is this, that you need a certain number of consumers in your target market to know you're there in order to generate sales. Remember, we talked about that sales funnel, and we said up at the top here we've got the entire target market, and then we move through. Well, one of the things that we saw was we need to get their attention. Okay, so that scrapes off a layer of that sales funnel. Well, what advertising is good for is getting people's attention. Once we've got their attention, then we've got to get them interested. Advertising is also very good at getting somebody interested in what you have to sell. Okay, but again, that's narrowing down the number of people that are going to buy your product as we go through the sales funnel. What else do we know about advertising? Well, we do know that on a percentage basis, small firms tend to pay more. Now, why do they pay more? Well, it's because they've got to get to that certain level where people pay attention to them, are interested in them. And that costs them considerably more on a percentage basis than it does for a larger company like Coca-Cola or somebody like that. The problem we've got with advertising is at some point it hits a point of diminishing marginal return. And if you don't remember that phrase from your economics class, let me just refresh your memory that the fact is that we reach a point where if we spend $1 on advertising, we're not getting that dollar coming back. It's a diminishing marginal return. So what we want to do theoretically is we spend $1 till we make the last dollar back. Now that's great in theory. It's great in an economics class. Here's the problem. In real life, it doesn't work. So what we have to have is kind of a feeling of, look, if we spend this amount, we know what's going to happen. And we'll try it until we're not seeing it anymore. Sometimes that's called a return on investment. Now, if that's the process you're using, that's fantastic. Other companies use a process where they look at what somebody else has done in the past, a similar company in the past. They go, okay, we'll spend that amount. Or they'll look at an industry average. But whatever method you're using, you have to keep in mind that you have to spend money in some way, shape, or form on advertising, whether it's online or traditional, in order to get the awareness up that people will buy your product. Now, advertising affects you and I on a daily basis, okay? We see on average about 10,000 advertising messages per day. And our brains have been attuned to cut out the stuff that's not important to us, so we don't think about those 10,000 in total. We only think about the couple of hundred that potentially impact us. What can we do as a marketer with advertising? Well, one thing we can try and do is if there's a negative opinion about us, we can try and shift it to a positive one. Walmart did that a few years ago in California during the Christmas season. A season when usually retailers are hyping a product they're selling, they're advertising that they've got holiday deals on. Walmart was fighting a public relations war that they were paying their employees so little that they were going on to Medicare. And Walmart's response during that Christmas season was to fight that negative by posting ads saying, hey, you know what? We actually provide health care for a small number of employees in small print. But what they were trying to do was change a negative opinion to a positive one, a negative attitude towards a positive one. And we see that if companies have big mistakes in the market, let's say they have a major recall, they will try and shift the opinion through advertising by talking about the good things they do. We also try and reinforce the opinion of branding. So if we know that people are positively predisposed towards a brand and why they're predisposed in a positive way, we'll reinforce that by showing advertising that shows that in place. We'll also try and change the way attributes are reached by consumers or what attributes are used by consumers. So if our research shows that Quality is very highly rated, but it's not our strong suit. However, we're better in price. What we'll try and do is we'll try and move price up the attribute side through our advertising. And what we'll do is we'll stress our price difference versus the quality. And again, what we're trying to do is get people to stop thinking about quality first, think about price first. We do see that on occasion. What are the major types of advertising out there? Well, there's essentially two. The first one is institutional. And institutional advertising is used by companies that are trying to improve the image of their brand or the image of the company, okay? So you'll see companies use this if they're trying to refute criticism that's been made against them. The Walmart example, that's a great example of an institutional ad, okay? When they're advertising, we do provide healthcare. They might also go if you've had some negative press recently. So the makers of, or the producers of romaine lettuce, for example, because that's been a big news story recently with all the cases where people have gotten sick, will probably do some institutional advertising talking about the benefits of romaine and how they've solved the problem. And we've seen that in companies that have had listeria breakouts, where they've had to shut down their production facility, totally clean it, and then come back. They will really stress the fact that they have a positive product and that they're a positive group to deal with. The other place where you see institutional advertising is on PBS. If you ever watch PBS, and it'll be an advertisement for General Electric or Boeing or Lockheed Martin as they're coming in to sponsor a program, those tend to be more institutional ads. Mainly because you're highly unlikely to run out and be the first person on your block to own your own F-35 from Lockheed Martin. You're probably not in the market for an Atlas missile or Atlas rocket from Boeing. What they're trying to do is show institutional ads that they support the American military, they support the American people, they make our life easier. Those are good examples of institutional ads. We're far more familiar with the second type of advertising, which is called product advertising. And in product advertising, what we try and do is we try and talk about a specific product. So Coke, we talk about all the things about Coke. Okay? Now, even inside product advertising, it breaks down into different types. In the introduction and growth stage, we do pioneering advertising because we're trying to stimulate primary demand. So we'll talk about, this new technology, why it's so much more important, because we're trying to get those original consumers in. As we go further along the product development cycle, the product life cycle, we get into competitive advertising. In competitive advertising, what we're really talking about, and that's during the growth phase, is we're trying to get you to buy our brand. We're trying to point out, here's where we're better than the other company. And here's why you want to buy us, okay? And that gets you into comparative advertising as well. In comparative advertising, we directly or indirectly compare the brands. So we'll show brand A and brand B. In competitive advertising, what we'll do is we'll talk about us in less in a vacuum, trying to influence demand for us. But when we get to comparative, which comes in at the late growth stage into maturity, what we're trying to do there is steal market share from somebody else. So we talk about how we compare on a specific attribute against that company. The old Pepsi Cola or the old Pepsi taste tests were a great example of comparative advertising and really show how you're trying to steal share from somebody else. If you take a look at truck ads today, the F-150 versus the Silverado versus the Dodge Ram, they'll all compare against each other, and they'll pick the areas where they're better than the other to do their comparisons. And what they're trying to do is get you to steal share because the truck industry is in the maturity stage. Okay. So what do we do in advertising? What are the decisions we make? Well, the first thing we do is we'll set up an advertising campaign. Okay. We'll do 2 or 3 ads that are focused on a common theme. Now think about this in terms of the Allstate ads. Allstate's advertising campaign, which they change up every year. Okay, they change the ads up. They bring in a few new ads. Focuses on one thing. Allstate protects you from mayhem because mayhem is everywhere. So they'll have mayhem pretending to be your cell phone stuck between the seats of your car. That's the current one. They'll have mayhem pretending to be an old flag that you've got flapping on the back of your vehicle. They'll have mayhem lying in the road pretending to be a flare. Okay? The goal of all of this, though, and the common goal is mayhem is everywhere. Be prepared. Buy Allstate. Okay? That's the advertising campaign. They come up with 2 or 3 or more ads, all with a common theme. Now, the objective is we set up, we need the advertising to do X over Y amount of time. Because advertising campaigns don't go on forever, they last for a short period of time. Now, a short period could be weeks, it could be days in the terms of if you're doing a campaign for a sale. It could be weeks, it could be months, it might, at most, it's probably about a year for a product. So what we do is we set objectives. What do we want it to do? Well, we might want it to build awareness to a certain level. We might want it to get the interest level at such and such a level. We might want people to rank one attribute over another at such a level. Well, that's what we want. So the first thing we do is we design the advertising campaign, then we design the objectives, and then we identify the product benefits. So we've said, okay, we need our, if one of the objectives is that we want a particular variable, a particular benefit we're providing to be ranked higher than others, a potential attribute or one of our attributes. Well, now we have to tie that back to a product benefit. Okay, so what are the benefits we're providing? And we'll bring that out. Okay, and remember, people buy benefits. People buy benefits, not attributes. Okay, then we go and develop a different series of advertising appeals. So if you ever watched Mad Men, they do up the storyboards, and we still do those today, that show the message we're trying to get across that fits with the campaign, the objectives, and the benefits we're trying to bring out. And the benefit, if you think back to one of the more famous Mad Men episodes, they were trying to come up with a way, the objective was for one of the tobacco companies to come up with a way that people would see it as not a harmful product, because the government was starting to crack down and declare cigarettes as bad for you. So you got Don Draper sitting around with the management team of the cigarette company, and Don goes, "Tell me how a cigarette's made." And the guy goes, "Well, we pick the tobacco, we dry the tobacco, and then we toast it." He goes, "Oh, wait, toast. Everybody understands toast. What do you mean?" "We'll call it toast. We'll say it's toasted. That's going to be the big benefit we're going to sell. Everybody understands that." And the CEO looks at him and goes, "Everybody does it." But they were the first ones, as Mr. Draper pointed out, to mention it. So they brought that benefit, that it was toasted, out, so that they could bring out a better part of their product. Okay? That was then put into a series of storyboards, which then the company looks at and decides which one they want to go with. And they're always looking for a unique selling position. In this case, it was the toasted was the unique selling position. So that's what you've got in terms of the creative decisions in advertising. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, that's great. What kind of appeals would they use in terms of getting people excited? Well, you can use a variety of them. You can talk about profit. You're going to make more money by doing this. You usually see that with financial institutions or companies that are selling financial services. Okay, we'll give you higher returns. Health will improve your health. Well, you see that with a variety of products now, whether it's juices or whether it's nutraceuticals. It's all about giving you a better health. The fear side will bring out a fear. If you don't use the product, here's what's likely to happen. Well, that's used by home security firms a lot. Okay? You could be broken into, but if you're protected by us, you're safe. Admiration. We try and find a way to show how people will admire you if you use the product or if you're seen with the product. Well, we see that a lot in personal beauty care products, both men and women's. Okay? If you use this type of deodorant and you're a guy, you will attract beautiful women. If you use this type of deodorant as a woman, you will attract beautiful men. Okay, we've seen both of those used in the past. Okay, people will admire you. Convenience. Our product is convenient to use. We'll talk about how we're locations everywhere. We'll talk about the fact we're online 24 hours a day. We'll bring out something that shows we're convenient to use. Okay, Apple used that, convenient and easy to use, with their iPhones. It was much more convenient than trying to figure out the smartphones of the day, okay, which weren't as smart as the iPhone. Fun and pleasure. Beer companies love fun and pleasure ads. You never see people sitting around drinking beer going, oh, I hate doing this. It's always people having a good time while they're drinking beer, okay? Having fun, out with their friends, pleasurable time. Not sitting in some dark bar getting, blitzed out of their minds type of thing. All right? So that's a fun and pleasure piece. Vanity and egotism. Well, vanity and egotism, that takes you back to things like cars. Okay, what does this car say about you? Fits your vanity. When they were trying to sell convertibles and things like that, those were very vanity kind of vehicles, especially when they were aiming at middle-aged men going through a crisis. Okay, good example. But a lot of beauty care products also fall into that. Look younger, feel better type of thing. Those are vanity and ego things. And environmental consciousness. We're now, the new one I've seen are the 6-pack rings that are made out of food for fish. So if you throw them into the ocean, you're not going to choke the fish can actually eat them. Well, that's environmentally conscious. Buy our beer and protect the environment at the same time. So you figure out the appeal you're going to use. Next up, you've got to execute that message. Well, how do you execute the message? Well, you can show things like a slice of life. You can show people enjoying your product as normal. And we see that quite usual. Sometimes when they're talking about, the new one I see is the Slinger ad. So people who use the Sling system on TV, it's a slice of life. 2 couples getting together for dinner, and one couple goes to the other, do you sling? Are you slingers? The other couple, or the male and the other couple, mistakes that, but it's still a slice of life type of thing. Lifestyle. Okay, lifestyle is being used by companies like KFC now, where they're showing the Colonel enjoying the rich life. So they show the Colonel on his yacht going through the ocean, and there's a group of people stranded out there. And what does he give them? He gives them KFC. Okay, but it's a lifestyle piece he's getting towards. Expensive luxury goods tend to use the lifestyle pieces as well. Sometimes you have a spokesperson testimonial. You've got Jennifer Garner is a very effective spokesperson for Capital One cards. And she represents that very well, and she gets across the benefits that Capital One provides by the way they structure their cards. Sometimes it's a testimonial. I took this, or I used this product, and I had this response. We sometimes see that with pharmaceutical products. Okay, we'll see, but we do see that with testimonials with other products as well. I used this type of juice and I did this. Or weight loss products are a great one for testimonials. I went on this diet and lost 25 pounds in 6 weeks. Okay. Fantasy. Progressive is using that right now. I love the new Progressive ads. It's got Jamie, who's sort of the little guy assistant to Flo. And they open the ad with he's kind of this Paul Bunyan-like character walking along, talks about he eats a bowl of hammers with every meal. He's this huge guy. He's there to protect you. And then they cut to the real scene of him at a homeowner's house, and a tree's fallen on her car, and she goes, it's covered, right? And he goes, oh yeah, it's covered. And he goes to do something, and he quickly realizes that he's not that strong, so he calls for help. Okay? That's a fantasy ad. Okay? Other fantasy ads were the old Dos Equis ads. I don't often drink beer, but when I do, blah, 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 I always drink Dos Equis. And he was always the most fascinating man in the world. And they list off these impossible things that he'd done, right? Okay, those were fantasy ads. You could use humor. Humor is used all the time in ads, but you have to be careful because what's funny to some people is not funny to others, okay? So you do see that in the progressive ads where they try and use humor, especially with Flo and her family sitting around talking about insurance. You see that in the Geico ads, where they talk about, they'll do the one where um, they'll start off with take your pick of the scenario, which you don't even know it's a Geico ad. It goes, as long as people, oh, the new one, the villain ad. Okay. See this kind of arch villain, kind of, 60s, 70s James Bondish, totally explaining out his fiendish plot. And then the announcer comes and says, as long as villains feel the need to explain their fiendish plot, there's Geico to save you $15 or 15% on your auto insurance. Well, that's a great use of humor. Okay. I find it funny because I'm from that generation. Right? We can use real or animated product symbols. Well, hey, that's all the rage. You got the Charmin bears, okay? Making sure that the toilet paper is clean enough that it doesn't leave pieces on their fur after they've used it. You've got the Geico gecko, who's always busy talking, and that British accent just gives them that much more class, and people pay attention to it. We used to have the old Hams ads that use that as well. So we've always had kind of these real or animated product symbols that we can go with. We can have demonstrations of the product. Let us show you how easy this product is to use. We see those all the time too. Okay, you put this in, here's what your dishes look like. You use this type of puck and it whitens your clothes. Okay, demonstrations. Could be musical. We've seen musical ads before. J.G. Wentworth has probably done more to bring opera to a new generation than anybody else because they use opera to sell their services. Okay, and sometimes we'll do scientific. We'll do a test. We'll show you scientifically that this is a better product for you. Okay. At the end of the campaign, we do a post-campaign evaluation. So we look and see on all the areas we can how effective it was. And we're looking for our ad effectiveness can be done numerous times. Usually what we want to do is we're trying to measure awareness, for example, if that's one of the goals of our ads. We'll measure awareness before, awareness during, and awareness after. So we can see the effectiveness of the campaign. But again, you want to test out and make sure the money you're spending is worthwhile. Okay, when you come back, we're going to take a look at the major types of media. Because of today's topic, I'm not going to post any additional videos. So when you've taken a look at this area, come on back and we'll talk about the different types of media.